Hello, I am Brock Stanton. I am a aspiring meteorologist, and today we're going to be taking a look at 3 days of severe weather, including today, which has been upgraded to a moderate risk for severe weather, which remember is a 4 out of 5 threat that is for damaging winds as well as tornadoes. As well as tornadoes. And then there's also a 30% significant for hail. We could see some stronger tornadoes, especially in this hatched risk area with any discrete supercell that does evolve, or even up here in the moderate risk area, there's a little bit of concern with upscale growth of storms, which means like rolling up into a line, but even there, any semi-discrete storm could be producing a strong tornado. So, heads up on that. We'll of course be talking a lot more about that later in the video. There's this day 2 slight risk. It's going to be mostly for damaging winds, however there is farther north where the shear is greater chance of a few tornadoes possible. And then on day 3, there's this slight risk across a large portion of West Texas and some portions of Oklahoma. The main threat with this is probably going to be hail, but there could be a couple instances of tornadoes as well. Damaging winds also going to be a risk with that. And then I'm not going to be talking about these 2 days as much in the video, but there is a day 4 and day 6 risk that, at least based off the Storm Prediction Center proxy, would be taking up over portions of Texas and Oklahoma, maybe portions of Kansas as well. We'll cover those in future videos. So we are first going to be taking a look at our ARW model. Models have trended towards more convection developing in like portions of southern Kansas and Oklahoma. You can see here how this model 12Z run does show these discrete supercells developing down here across portions of northern Oklahoma and perhaps southern Kansas. And then this up here, these lines of storms up here, and any discrete cell that can evolve within these, or you can see here, the storm right there. This is why there's that moderate risk for tornadoes up here, though. I do think there is also I could see still definitely a few significant tornadoes possible down here. Just because the storm mode is going to be more discrete and the environment is still favorable. Though, despite trending towards more storms and coverage, there's still a little bit uncertainty with the storm coverage, and that's why there's not a moderate risk out for that area. However, I do think the storm intensity is still be quite severe. You can see as we move into the overnight hours, and then this line of storms will shift south and spin to the south in the overnight hours, offering up mostly damaging winds. Let's take a look at the environment on this. We're going to take a look at our cap inversion first and just see why storms are now firing. We're going to see how the cap basically completely erodes by 22Z, and this is, I believe, this is 5 o'clock in the evening, 5 o'clock Central Time, so around dinner time. You can see capping inversions basically completely eroded here across central Oklahoma and southern Kansas, and that will allow for, with the dry line attack that's forcing, will initiate our isolated supercell thunderstorms, and that could support very, very large hail, like 2, 3, 4 inch hail, not out of the question, damaging winds, and some tornadoes as well, including a couple strong tornadoes are likely across a large portion of that enhanced area for tornadoes potential across northern Oklahoma, Kansas, and I believe southern Nebraska as well. All the way up from northern Oklahoma up through like southeast southern Nebraska. Pretty large area at risk. So we're going to take a look at our CAPE now. Why is it doing this? Okay, there we go. That's better. We can see how the instability is currently already developing, and you can see that by peak heating, our surface-based CAPE is going to be in excess of 3,000, but our mixed weather CAPE, that's what I believe is more important. We're going to see still well over 2,000, perhaps over 3,000. You can see there's our storms initiating there, and that's going to support supercell thunderstorms, again, capable of all hazards, and all hazards, significant hazards at that. We're now going to take a look at our storm relative helicity values, and we're going to see how across this the moderate risk area for tornadoes, basically throughout the entire day, they're going to be favorable for tornadoes and strong tornadoes. And that's why, despite a little bit of questions with storm mode possibly becoming a little more linear, that there's still that moderate risk for strong tornadoes. But farther south, it does take a bit longer to have these strong storm relative helicity values develop. Our 0 to 1 level generally takes around to 6 or 7 o'clock to have them really increase and become favorable for strong tornadoes. We'll probably see a similar deal on our 0 to 3 level. Not as much, they are going to be favorable a little earlier on, but still overall seems to be more around and after dinner time is when that tornado threat's going to ramp up across the southern mode into like southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma. That does seem to be what this model is showing. I believe that's all the models are really showing. So we are now going to take a look at our next model, the NSSL. And we're going to take a look at our reflectivity output first. I believe this model does also fire isolated storms, even in the southern mode. Yeah, we can see it's maybe even fires them even further south, but we can see how here these in the northern mode there's these storms that try to become supercellular, significant damaging winds. I realize I'm talking mostly about the tornado risk. There's going to be significant damaging winds of like 80 miles per hour. That's tornado strength, so it doesn't really matter whether the winds are rotating or not. That can still cause a lot of damage. But we can see how it does fire these storms further south, and this more northern mode here. And I do think storms could develop in this area where it's not. There's not necessarily a reason that it would not. In fact, I would think convective initiation is more likely across southern Kansas and southern Oklahoma. Could still see storms forming in southern Oklahoma. There's a slight risk there for significant hail for a reason, but it's a little more uncertain down there. You can see that line of storms develop into the overnight, capable of significant damaging winds, tornadoes, perhaps even a strong tornado in the line of storms as well, since our level shear values will be quite strong. We're going to take a look at our capping conversion. Again, just notice how it erodes. Notice the time of this model coming out. This was 8 in the morning. Temperatures haven't warmed yet. There's that strong capping inversion. But then as we warm throughout the day, it mostly erodes away. And that's why we get these storms developing across portions of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. Notice how there's still not much of a capping inversion in southern Kansas, so storms could still absolutely form in this environment. I'm going to take a look at our cape now, though. And we're going to see how, again, our robust cape over 2,000, perhaps even over 3,000. So this is going to be a moderate to high-end cape event, and that's going to help fuel this very large hail threat. Again, 2, 3, 4-inch hail is not out of the question with this setup. And see how the instability gets eaten up as the storms move to the east. And we are going to look at our bulk shear on this model quickly. We're going to see how with the northern mode, looks like there's already some pretty good shear in place for the most part. Yeah, it looks like for the most part there's decent shear. In fact, very good low-level shear. Our deep layer shear isn't as favorable as our low-level shear, but still sufficient. And then with our southern mode, it looks like it has it increase. It was time in the overnight hours over 40 knots. Perhaps, let's see what this sounding looks like here. I haven't taken many soundings so far today. I think the capping inversion is too strong. That's probably to the east of the storms, so probably 40 to 50 knots bulk shear. And that will help organize significant severe weather. The bulk shear will help organize significant severe weather. We're now going to take a look at our HRRR. In this model, at least the 12Z run, still does not initiate to the east of the dry line. However, this is basically the only model that doesn't show that. You can see how it's much more organized with that blowing segment of storms up here. That would support pretty significant damaging wind threat here. You can see the bowing segments, and then there's potential that there could be an embedded supercell or maybe a line like maybe on the southern end of the line, there could be a discrete supercell developing. You can see there's that turning photograph. Very strong cape. And again, that's going to support our significant severe weather risk. The other models don't show me the 850 jet, so we're going to take a look at that and just see what the HRRR shows quickly. And we're going to see how this is 4 o'clock Central Time, so only a few hours from now, how our 35 to 40 knot plus low level jet, it's basically, again, across central Oklahoma, perhaps southeastern Oklahoma, and points north, but it's going to dramatically increase into 0Z, and we can see how now there's a 50 knot low level jet, and it'll just continue to increase into the overnight hours, and that will help support that overnight squall line. Just curious how much stability there's in this sounding. Still a good bit of instability, but there's a capping to start to become a concern into the overnight hours with that squall line that could eventually weaken it. But still strong low level shear would support a risk for damaging winds with that, perhaps a tornado or two. I'm going to take a look at our storm relative helicity values. And we're going to see how, again, they take some time for them to increase with this farther south node. They'll appear they're going to be favorable that whole time. And that's part of the reason there's that moderate risk out there for damaging winds and tornadoes. That and the more organized bowing structure, especially for the damaging wind threat. And then for the tornado threat, the fact that there's going to be more coverage of storms, even if the storm mode may not be quite as favorable, does still support that tornado risk. And then into the overnight hours, we can see our storm relative velocity values will increase greatly. Similar thing on the 0 to 3 levels. Yeah, I mean by 0Z. That's very strong 0 to 3 storm relative helicity. We are going to take a look at our dry line and just kind of take some soundings, perhaps just east it, just to kind of show how there's not really going to be any cap in place. Here, we'll just take a sounding just east. And yeah, there's absolutely no cap along this dry line, so that would really make me think that storms would initiate in this environment. There's not really too much stopping it, at least in a narrow quarter to the east of the dry line. I would imagine a similar thing up here in Kansas. Yeah, very similar. There's basically no capping inversion, and that's going to support our supercells developing along that dry line, moving eastward and supporting that significant tornado, hail, and damaging wind risk. We're also going to take a quick look at our NAM before we move on to our day 2 risk. Yeah, let's go to our reflectivity. And the NAM does fire storms. It fires them even across the south in sometimes a little bit of a cluster. It kind of fires the storms into a little bit of clusters here across southern Kansas. I think the storm mode would likely be more discrete. The NAM 3K does have a bias towards a more linear storm mode, and the overall environment just screams supercells for if a storm develops. So I don't really think we're going to see that clustery storm mode. You can see they then probably weaken likely due to the capping inversion, and then this line of storms does get organized. And again, that would support our damaging winds, perhaps some significant damaging winds within that as well. And yeah, we're just going to take a look at our cape to show what the NAM is saying with that. You can see by 21Z, it's already starting to hint at initiation there. It's a hole in the cape because of a storm. And again, we're just going to show there's a weak cap in this environment, but obviously storms are breaking through it because we can see there's already a storm forming right there. And then once those storms develop along the dry line, they'll move eastward, again supporting all hazards. We are now going to take a look at our day 2 risk. We're going to have to look at this on the regular NAM, can't go to the 3K version. We're going to zoom in on the south central United States, and I do think the main risk for this event is going to be hail this will be on Sunday. Wait, no, I'm just skipped right over the day 2 risk. I need to go back and look at that first. I'm silly. You can look at the NAM 3K for that though. Zoom in on, actually we'll go a little farther north. We'll go to the Midwest United States. And the general storm mode for this event is probably going to be messy clusters for the day on Saturday. Perhaps a few supercells try and develop, and if those supercells can develop, that will be where our greatest tornado risk will be. But let's just see, here's this convective line trying to organize in the afternoon. You can see perhaps some hinting at a supercell or two in there, but let's just take a sounding here across eastern Illinois. And we're going to see there's no capping inversion. That cap is not going to be an issue with this event whatsoever. You can see there is a tiny bit of curve in the hodograph, but it's not really too favorable of a turned hodograph. And sufficient cape, not nearly as high values as what we have today, but still around 1,000 cape will support a damaging wind and tornado risk. We are going to take a look at our 850 jet, and we're going to see how the strongest winds are going to be across the northern portion of the slight risk. And that is one of the reasons why the slight risk for tornadoes is across the northern portion of it. If we remember, that's up around the Chicago area here, day 2. Areas around Chicago do have a chance of seeing an isolated tornado tomorrow. And that's because of this low-level jet being strongest up there, but in the warm sector it's going to be stronger in the further north section of it. It's going to be relatively weaker further south. So again, these messy storm modes probably going to support most of the damaging wind risk, but because of our stronger low-level shear, we could see a tornado or two with that. We are going to take a look at our Cape of Blend and Shear quickly on the NAM. Our Energy Helicity Index is what it's called, but it's basically a blend of Cape and Shear. So this is at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. You can see how despite maybe there being slightly less Cape further north, let's just double check that. Yeah, there's going to be less Cape further north, but our energy helicity values are pretty similar, if not maybe even slightly higher further north because of that stronger shear. And again, I think we're going to see mostly damaging winds, so that a tornado or two cannot be ruled out. We're now going to take a look at our HRR quickly for this day 2 risk. We're going to continue showing this through the day on Saturday overnight, Friday night into Saturday. We can see how this line actually does last pretty far east. I'm curious to see what our soundings are like, just see how far east this severe threat could go. And maybe an isolated severe wind gust into the overnight hours, but I think it will be decreasing some by that point, and then that's going to cause some morning showers. I'm curious to see how, that's probably what's going to be limiting our amount of instability, is just morning showers here. But we can see how storms will redevelop further west, and again, see how it's a really messy, clustery mode, but you can see maybe some supercells at points trying to develop. Saw one down there earlier. Perhaps some here, maybe further west before storm modes go too much upscale would probably be the greater chance for supercells. But I do think damaging winds is going to be the main risk, and let's just take a sounding here and see what our hodograph looks like. Again, it's curving a little bit, but not too much, and that's what I do think is going to put a limiting factor on our tornado risk, that and the overall storm mode. But let's take a look at our Cape for this day. And we can see how, again, it's going to be a pretty limited Cape with northern extent, but it is possible that it's likely that enough instability will develop to support that isolated to scattered damaging wind risk, perhaps a tornado or two as well. Let's take a look at our 850 jet on this as well. We can see as we get into the afternoon and evening hours, this low-level jet's going to strengthen. The HRR seems to have a little bit of a stronger low-level jet than what the NAM shows, but you can see this axis of a 40-knot low-level jet, and it does expand further south, and that would make me think maybe if the HRR solution is correct, that tornado threat could extend a little further south, but even then the 850 ones are going to be even stronger further north still, regardless of exactly how strong they are. That's still going to be what the case is, so I still do think that the greatest tornado risk, still not a high-end tornado risk by any means, again, maybe probably an isolated tornado or two, but I do think that greatest risk is going to be further north across portions of eastern Illinois, around the Chicago area, but it's still going to be a fairly isolated risk. We are also going to take a look at our bulk shear. I realized I never looked at this on the NAM, but we're just going to take a look at it on our HRRR quickly. And we're going to see how there's going to be low level, there'll be bulk shear. It's not in the low levels, I don't know why I was saying that, but our bulk shear is going to be around 50 knots for this northern mode, less further south. And again, that's why I think our tornado risk is going to be highest further north, because that's going to help organize storms in the supercells a little bit more help get storms a little more organized. I'm just going to take a quick look at our storm relative helicity values. And they are favorable for tornadoes. However, I do think that storm mode is going to make it more difficult to see a tornado risk. But again, one or two tornadoes are not out of the realm of possibility. We are now going to take a look at our day 3 risk. We should be able to take a look at it on our NAM 3K through 0Z. Yeah, and this day does have a chance. I think the biggest risk with this will be significant hail, but we could also see a couple tornadoes develop with this day as well. We can see how these storms try and develop, and we might look at the regular NAM to see if we can look a little further, but we can see how it has, I think it probably has the dry line pretty far west based off of this, but we can see how these storms develop, perhaps some out ahead of the line. Just for a reminder of the risk area, I realize it's a bit of a longer video. This is where the day 3 risk is, and across portions of the Texas Panhandle there is a significant risk for, and that would be for hail, for 2+ inches. You can see how these storms initiate, and we're just going to take a sounding here and see what it's looking like. Actually pretty good moisture on this. I think some other models are not as aggressive with the moisture return, and that could put a limit on the tornado threat for this event. We're just going to have to see. It's still a little bit uncertain what the tornado risk will be at this time, but at least a few tornadoes do appear possible. I think if we look up here, though, yeah, we can see there's really not any moisture up there. And that means I think we should show what the dew points are for this system and just see what we can look at it quickly. And you can see this is going to be rapidly returning moisture because that cold front just comes through. So that moisture return, exactly how far north it's going to get, is a big question mark. The regular run of the NAM expands it pretty far west, but it never really seems to get up in the Texas Panhandle through 0Z. I'm going to take a look at the regular NAM and see if that changes after 0Z. Generally just maybe gets moisture a little further north, but not as far west, but it doesn't, and it does get it a little further north into the overnight hours. Curious to see if it even fires storms at that point, or if the moisture return is just too late. Gonna look at our composite reflectivity. So yeah, so maybe the risk will be a little more into the overnight hours for the Texas Panhandle. You can see there's it was just enough moisture that we could get a tornado threat, and there's a pretty good looping photograph. So I would think that based off this, there's some pretty strong 850 winds. Let's take a look, and yeah, into the overnight hours, that low level wind shear does ramp up quite a bit, so we're just gonna have to see how these things shake out. It's still day 3, have more time to develop, a little more time to give you an update on this, but it does appear to be a risk for supercells developing along a dry line out here, perhaps maybe an open warm sector storm or two as well, and this could carry a risk of significant hail, damaging winds, perhaps a tornado risk, but that's going to be dependent on how much the moisture return is. And quickly before we wrap up this video, I'm just going to show the moisture return from other models, just so you can kind of see how other models are less aggressive with it. And see, this is by 0Z, how there's really not too much moisture here, certainly not as further west. The dry line advances a little further east for that, so storm initiation would likely be further east. And you can see how those 60s dew points do struggle to make it here. However, 50s will still be sufficient for severe weather, but really for a tornado potential we need upper 50s or 60s dew points. Now we're going to take a look at the Euro to see what that does with our moisture. And we're going to see that it keeps it much, well, through the 0Z increases some, but still the NAM is going to be more aggressive, especially with the further west dry line and the 60s dew points maybe not coming in quite as much on the Euro and GFS. I will say the moisture return is going to be sufficient for our day 4 risk, though, as recording is already 26 minutes long, so I need to wrap up this video now. So that's going to be the end of this video. Again, there's that day 4 and day 6 risk. I just don't have time to cover them right now, and the video would be too long. However, we will be covering those in upcoming videos. I do hope you enjoyed the video, found it helpful. So please consider liking and subscribing and following me on Twitter. I will post my link to the Twitter in the description, and I will see you next time. Bye.